They ask me if I have regrets. If I regret watching my father lose the house my mother built with her own hands. If I regret dismantling my sister's carefully curated fantasy life, exposing every filtered lie to 52,000 followers who believed her morning routine was anything more than expensive laziness funded by someone else's sacrifice. If I regret forcing 23 family members to choose sides at Thanksgiving dinner, knowing some would never speak to me again. I look at them, these people who want neat stories with tidy morals, and I tell them the truth. The only thing I regret is that it took me 6 years to see it. But to understand why I burned it all down, why I walked away from the family I'd bled for without looking back, you need to know how the match was lit. You need to know what it feels like to discover that the people you love most have been treating your devotion like a renewable resource, mining it, selling it, laughing about it while you're halfway around the world keeping the lights on. It started on a Thursday, December 5th, 2024. Though really, if I'm honest, it started the moment I decided to come home. The clock on my phone read 2:47 in the morning when truth found me in my childhood bedroom, in a house that should have felt like sanctuary, but instead felt like a crime scene I'd been too blind to notice. I'd been back in Boise for 72 hours. 72 hours of noticing things that didn't add up, of pushing down the trained analyst's instinct that something was wrong, of telling myself I was paranoid, that 11 months deployed at sea had made me suspicious of everyone. But instincts exist for a reason, and mine had been screaming since I walked through that crooked screen door, and nobody asked how I was. Nobody asked about the deployment, about the 180 nights sleeping in a rack the size of a coffin, about the engine fires and the 18-hour shifts, and the way the Indian Ocean looks at dawn when you haven't seen land in 43 days. They asked if I could fix Sienna's car battery, if I had time to look at the water heater, if I remembered to set up the automatic transfer for this month. Always what I could give, never who I was. The video changed everything. 47 seconds of my sister's voice, caught on the security camera I'd installed during my last visit, back when I still believed we were building something together. Back when I thought sending $3,600 every single month was an investment in family, not a subscription service they'd cancel the moment I stopped being useful. Her words played on loop in my mind even after I'd closed the app. That dumb Navy sister. Government muscle with a paycheck. She's trained like a dog. We say jump. She asks how much money do you need? But that wasn't the part that hollowed me out. The part that made my hands shake, made my throat close, made something fundamental shift in my understanding of the last 6 years. That was when she said it. When she laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone and said, "This is basically my house now anyway. Kate has no idea." Kate has no idea. I sat there in the darkness, in the room that used to be mine before it became her filming backdrop, surrounded by the string lights she'd hung without asking and the full-length mirror I didn't recognize. And I realized she was right. I had no idea. No idea my father had sold my mother's car, the 1969 Cutlass she'd saved 3 years to buy, the one she'd taught me to change the oil in, the one he swore he'd never part with because it was all he had left of her. No idea he'd use that money to pay off a mortgage I'd been sending payments for another 14 months. No idea they'd spent $50,000 of my money on a lifestyle neither of them had earned while I was eating meals that came in plastic pouches and sleeping in a room with 6 other women. No idea that every time I wired money home, they were laughing about it. If you've ever funded someone's dream while they mocked yours, if you've ever sacrificed for people who saw your devotion as stupidity, leave a comment below. Because this is the story of how I took it all back. Every single penny. Every ounce of respect they thought they'd never have to pay. And how I did it so quietly, so completely, that they never saw it coming. The flight from San Diego to Boise took 2 hours and 40 minutes. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching the landscape shift from coastal sprawl to high desert to the familiar brown hills of home, trying to remember what home was supposed to feel like, trying to convince myself that the knot in my stomach was jet lag, not dread. I'd been gone 11 months. 11 months aboard the USS Nimitz, assigned to the intelligence division, spending my days in a windowless room analyzing satellite imagery and communications intercepts and threat assessments. 11 months of classified briefings and 4 hours of sleep and the constant metallic taste of recycled air. 11 months of thinking about this moment, about walking through that door and seeing my father's face, about hugging my sister and feeling like maybe, finally, I could stop carrying them for a little while. Thomas Sullivan stood at the end of the driveway when the Uber pulled up, leaning against his truck in a pose that might have looked casual if I hadn't been trained to read body language. His arms were crossed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The hug he gave me lasted exactly 2 seconds, and when he pulled back, his first words weren't "welcome home," or "I missed you," or even "how are you?" What he said was, "Did you get a chance to look at the latest transfer? I know it's a little early in the month, but with the holidays coming up, thought it might be good to have the extra cushion." I stood there in my Navy working uniform, sea bag still in the Uber's trunk, and felt something small and vital crack inside my chest. But I smiled, nodded, said of course not a problem. I'd set it up tonight. 'Cause that's what I always did. That's who I'd always been. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same chipped paint on the porch post that I'd been meaning to scrape and repaint for 3 years. Same crooked screen door that never quite latched. The one my mother had been after my father to fix since 2012. Same flower bed she'd planted by hand, now overgrown with weeds because nobody had bothered to maintain them after she died. But inside was different. I noticed the television first. 75 inches of OLED glory mounted above the fireplace, where my mother's landscape paintings used to hang. The kind of TV that costs more than some people's monthly rent. The kind of TV you don't buy when you're supposedly struggling to make ends meet, when your daughter is sending you $3,600 every month just to keep the lights on. Then the couch. Restoration hardware, if I had to guess. Buttery leather that probably cost more than my last 3 paychecks combined. Throw pillows that match the new curtains that match the new area rug. Everything coordinated, everything expensive, everything new. The kitchen had been updated too. Espresso machine on the counter. Not a cheap one, but the Italian brand that serious coffee people spend months researching. New stainless steel appliances, granite countertops where there used to be laminate, fresh paint in a trendy gray that definitely wasn't Home Depot's contractor special. I set my bag down slowly, carefully, keeping my face neutral the way they'd taught us in survival training. Don't show your cards, don't reveal what you know, gather information first. My father watched me take it all in, waited for me to comment. When I didn't, he cleared his throat and gestured vaguely at the living room. "We did some upgrades while you were gone. Sienna found this great interior designer on Instagram. Really transformed the space. You like it?" I nodded, because what else could I do? But I was already calculating, already adding up the numbers. Television, 2,800. Couch, at least 4,000. Kitchen appliances, maybe 6,000 for the set. Countertops, installation, paint, easily another 8,000. Roughly $25,000 in upgrades. While I was deployed. While I was sending money for the mortgage, for utilities, for groceries. While my father was supposedly retired on a fixed income, and my sister was supposedly building her influencer business from scratch with zero outside funding. Sienna didn't come downstairs until almost 1 in the afternoon the next day. I'd been awake since 05:30. Old habits, military habits. Had gone for a run through the neighborhood, showered, made coffee, started a load of laundry. I'd watched the house wake up around me, noticed all the small changes that added up to something bigger. The smart home system, the video doorbell, the premium subscriptions, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, all displayed on that massive television. The refrigerator full of organic produce and grass-fed beef and artisanal cheese, the kind of groceries you buy when you're not actually worried about money. When she finally appeared, she was wearing a matching loungewear set, velvet, the color of wine, with delicate gold zippers at the ankles and wrists. The kind of outfit that cost $340 at Anthropology because I'd seen Sienna tag the brand in enough Instagram posts to recognize it on site. Her hair was professionally highlighted, blonde streaks woven through light brown in that way that takes 3 hours in a salon chair, and costs at least $250 every 6 weeks. Her nails were freshly done, coffin-shaped acrylics in nude pink with tiny gold details. Another $80, plus tip. She breezed into the kitchen, grabbed a green smoothie from the refrigerator, pre-made, purchased, probably $6 at Whole Foods, and finally acknowledged my existence with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "OMG, Kay, You're back. I was gonna come out yesterday when you got here, but I literally had 3 brand calls back to back. Absolute insanity. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I'd spent yesterday unpacking in a room that was only half mine anymore, noticing how my belongings had been pushed into one corner to make space for her filming equipment. Ring lights, tripods, backdrops, a whole studio's worth of gear occupying the room where I'd grown up, where I used to do homework at a desk that no longer existed, where I'd packed my sea bag 6 years ago and left for boot camp thinking I was doing something noble. But I smiled, nodded, asked how the calls went. She launched into an explanation of her latest collaboration opportunity, something about a skincare brand that wanted her to create content, except they couldn't pay her yet because they were just starting out. But the exposure would be amazing, and really she just needed to buy $300 worth of product to get started. And could I maybe, possibly, if it wasn't too much trouble, I sent her $200 via Venmo before she even finished asking. Typed the amount, added a heart emoji, pressed send. Watched her face light up. Watched her immediately open her own phone to check that the money had cleared. You're the best! Seriously, I'll pay you back when this campaign takes off. This brand is going to be huge. I can feel it. She'd said the same thing about the last collaboration, and the one before that, and the one before that. 5 years of collaborations that never quite paid off, of brands that were always just about to take off, of investments that would definitely pay dividends soon. 5 years of me sending money, and 5 years of her promising returns that never materialized. But that was fine. That was what family did, right? The strong helped the weak. The employed supported the entrepreneurs. The stable subsidized the dreamers. That's what I told myself anyway. What I'd been telling myself for 6 years. What I'd believed right up until I watched that video at 2:47 in the morning and realized I hadn't been supporting a dream. I'd been funding a delusion. I spent Friday observing. Not obviously, I'd been trained too well for that, but carefully, methodically, the way I analyzed intelligence reports, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, the gaps between what people said and what they did. My father asked me to look at Sienna's car. The battery had been dying for weeks, he said. She'd been meaning to take it to the shop, but she was so busy with work, and I knew how these things were. And since I was home anyway, I asked why she couldn't take it herself. Asked why a 28-year-old woman with no children, no job outside her house, and complete control over her schedule couldn't find 2 hours to visit an auto parts store. He got defensive, irritated. Said I didn't understand how demanding content creation was, how much mental energy it took, how I was being judgmental because I didn't understand entrepreneurship. I let it go, but I noted it. Sienna filmed what she called her Sunday reset routine, which involved her waking up at 11, making an acai bowl that cost approximately $18 in ingredients, doing 20 minutes of yoga in front of the camera, and talking about manifestation and abundance and choosing joy. She posted it with hashtags about hustle culture and building your empire and being your own boss. Then she ordered $60 worth of Thai food for lunch because cooking was too much work, and spent the afternoon scrolling TikTok on the couch I'd paid for, in the house I kept afloat, eating food purchased with money I'd earned. I noted that too. My father mentioned 3 separate times that money was tight, that groceries were so expensive these days, that he didn't know how people managed. But he had new golf clubs in the garage. Callaway, top of the line, probably $1,400 for the full set. He had a subscription to some premium sports streaming service. He ordered dinner twice that weekend, $50 to $70 each time, and didn't offer to pay when I suggested we all split the bill. I noted everything. And late Friday night, when the house was quiet and my father was asleep in his recliner, and Sienna was in her room editing content, I opened the app for the security camera I'd installed 9 months earlier. I'd put it in during my last visit home, back in March. The front door latch had been broken. Still was broken, I'd noticed. And Sienna had left the stove on twice in 1 week. And I'd been worried about fire, about break-ins, about something happening while I was on the other side of the world with no way to help. I'd spent $200 on a good camera system, installed it myself, showed my father how to check the app, how to review footage if he needed to. He'd nodded, said it was a good idea, said I was always thinking ahead, always taking care of things, then apparently forgot about it entirely. The app showed 187 motion detections in the past week. I scrolled through them, expecting nothing, finding nothing. Thomas getting the mail, Sienna making smoothies, the mailman dropping packages. Normal life, mundane life, the kind of footage that piles up when you have a camera pointed at a kitchen. Then I reached Thursday, 4:15 in the afternoon, the day before I came home. The thumbnail showed Sienna standing at the kitchen counter, phone pressed to her ear. Nothing unusual. I almost scrolled past. Something made me tap play. The audio was clear, too clear. I'd bought a good camera, the kind with noise cancellation and enhanced pickup, because I'd wanted to make sure it would catch smoke alarms or breaking glass. I hadn't thought about what else it might catch. Sienna's voice came through crystal clear mid-conversation. No, she's coming back tomorrow. Yeah, the Navy sister. She laughed, the kind of laugh that made my stomach clench even before I understood why. I know, right? She thinks she's so important. Like, okay, Kate, thank you for your service, but can you also Venmo me? I literally just spent her money at Sephora and told her it was for business expenses. She never even asked for a receipt. I watched myself freeze, watched my hand hover over the phone screen, unable to press stop, unable to look away. Dad and I have a deal. She sends the monthly payment. We don't tell her it's basically just funding my lifestyle now. The actual bills are like, what, $800? The rest is mine. The person on the other end of the call said something I couldn't hear. Sienna nodded, smiled, examined her nails. No, but seriously, she's government muscle with clearance. She doesn't get entrepreneurship, doesn't get what it takes to build a brand. I'm creating something real here. Another pause, then her voice dropped lower, took on a different quality, conspiratorial, gleeful. And between you and me, this is basically my house now anyway. Dad's signing over more ownership next month. Kate has no idea. She's too busy playing spy or whatever the fuck intelligence officers actually do. She laughed again. That same laugh, bright and careless and cruel. She's trained like a dog, honestly. We say jump, she asks how much money do you need? It's kind of pathetic. The video was 47 seconds long. I watched it 5 times. Then I took screenshots of every frame, downloaded the file, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, sent it to an encrypted email account I use for sensitive work files. Then I sat in the darkness of my half-occupied childhood bedroom and opened my banking app. I'd set up automatic transfers in April of 2019. 2 months after my mother died, when my father had called me sobbing, saying he couldn't make the mortgage payment, couldn't keep up with the bills, didn't know how he was going to survive without her income. When Sienna had just dropped out of community college for the second time and was living at home rent-free, supposedly looking for work, but mostly sleeping until noon, and complaining about how hard job searching was. I'd been 28, fresh off my first deployment, making decent money, living in barracks, eating at the galley, not spending much because there wasn't time or opportunity. I'd had savings, I'd had stability, I'd had a family that needed help. So I'd helped. $3,600, transferred automatically on the first of every month. 68 months, 68 transfers. I did the math slowly, carefully, double-checking because surely I'd gotten it wrong. Surely it couldn't be that much. 3,600 times 68, $244,800. I stared at the number until it stopped meaning anything. Until it was just digits on a screen, abstract and impossible. $250,000. More than most people made in 4 years of full-time work. More than some houses cost. More than I'd spent on myself in my entire adult life. Gone. But that wasn't the full story. There were the extras. The emergency transfers that came between the automatic payments. Car repairs, $4,200 over the years. Medical bills, $3,800. Insurance that needed paying right now or they'd lose coverage, $2,400. Sienna's business investments, always presented as crucial opportunities that couldn't wait. $12,600 spread across a dozen different ventures. That one time the IRS supposedly demanded immediate payment, $5,000. Hundreds of small requests, $200 here, $800 there, always urgent, always necessary, always with a promise to pay me back that never materialized. I scrolled through Venmo, through PayPal, through Zelle and wire transfer confirmations and every digital trail of money leaving my account and flowing into theirs. $36,000 in emergency transfers. Total, $280,800. I closed the banking app, Opened my photos, looked at the screenshot of Sienna's face, froze in mid-laugh, talking about me like I was a trained animal. Then I opened a new tab and did what intelligence analysts do when we need to verify information. I started digging. The mortgage refinance had happened in June of 2019. My father had called me from the bank's parking lot, voice shaking, saying they were going to foreclose, that he'd missed 3 payments since Mom died, that he'd tried to handle it alone, but he couldn't, and could I please help him save the house. I'd left work early, driven to the bank, sat across from a loan officer who'd explained that we could refinance the remaining balance into a new 15-year mortgage if I co-signed. Put my name on the loan, my credit, my responsibility. $180,000 at 6% interest. Monthly payment, $3,200. I'd signed. Wired the first 3 months' payments up front to catch up on the arrears. Set up the automatic transfer to cover it every month going forward because I'd be deployed, because I couldn't trust my father to handle payments, because I was the responsible one. Because that's what good daughters did. The loan account was in both our names. I had full access. I should have checked it monthly, but I hadn't because I'd trusted them. Because I'd been busy. Because checking felt like I didn't believe they'd be honest with me. I logged in now. The dashboard loaded. And there, in bold letters at the top of the screen, was a status I hadn't expected. Loan paid in full. Date, October 15th, 2023. I read it 3 times. 4, 5. The words didn't change. 14 months ago, they'd paid off the loan 14 months ago, which meant I'd been sending $3,600 every month for 14 months for a debt that no longer existed. 14 times $3,600, $50,400. Sent for nothing, taken for nothing, stolen if I was being honest about what this was. I clicked through to the payment details. Payoff source, asset sale, vehicle title transfer. Amount, $24,500. I knew that number. Knew it before I even saw the description. Knew it in my bones, in the sick twist of my gut, in the way my hands started shaking. My mother's car, the 1969 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme she'd bought in 1997 with money from her nursing job, back before she married my father, back when she was independent and free and building a life on her own terms. The car she'd taught me to drive in. The car she'd loved more than any possession she ever owned. The car my father had sobbed over at her funeral, saying he could never part with it because it was all he had left of her. He'd sold it for $24,500, used that money to pay off the mortgage, then let me keep sending payments for over a year like nothing had changed. I searched for the bill of sale, found it in my father's email account. I had the password because he'd asked me to help reset it 2 years ago, and never bothered changing it. Found the email, dated September 28th, 2023. Classic car collector, Sacramento, California. Final sale price, $24,500. Exactly enough to pay off the loan, to the dollar. Which meant this wasn't accidental, wasn't an oversight. He'd known exactly how much he needed, had timed it perfectly, had made a calculated decision to sell my mother's most precious possession and use the money to free himself from debt while letting me continue to fund their lifestyle. I kept searching. Found the property records for the house. Found something else I wasn't expecting. Equity transfer agreement dated November 14th, 2023, 1 month after the loan payoff. Thomas Sullivan's ownership decreased from 60% to 40%. Sienna Sullivan's ownership increased from 0% to 30%. My ownership unchanged at 40%. But nobody had told me, nobody had asked, nobody had even mentioned that my father was giving away a third of the house to my sister the moment the debt cleared. The house my mother had bought, the house she'd made the down payment on with money from her nursing salary, the house she'd wanted me to have. I sat there in the darkness, staring at legal documents that proved my family had been systematically, deliberately defrauding me for over a year. Staring at evidence of lies, piled on manipulation so complete that I'd never even questioned it. Because I'd trusted them. Because I'd loved them. Because I'd believed that family meant something more than just being born to the same parents. I opened a new folder on my laptop, labeled it Operation Restoration, created subfolders for financial evidence, legal documents, communication records, strategic planning. Then I started downloading everything. Bank statements, email confirmations, property records, screenshots, the video of Sienna, every piece of evidence I could find, organized and cataloged and preserved the way I'd been trained to handle classified intelligence. I worked until 3 in the morning, until I had a case file that would make any prosecutor weep with joy, until I had proof so airtight, so comprehensive, that there would be no argument, no excuse, no way for them to claim this was all a misunderstanding. Then I closed my laptop, lay down on the bed that used to be fully mine, stared at the ceiling that Sienna had decorated with her string lights, and I made a decision. They'd trained me for 11 years, trained me to analyze threats, to identify targets, to execute missions with precision and patience, to stay calm under pressure, to never show my hand until the moment I needed to strike. My family had made one critical mistake. They'd forgotten I wasn't just a paycheck in a uniform. They'd forgotten that before I was their ATM, I was an intelligence officer. And intelligence officers don't get mad. We get even. The next morning was Saturday. I woke at 5:30 out of habit, went for a run through the neighborhood I'd grown up in, came back to a house that was still sleeping, made coffee in the expensive espresso machine, sat at the granite countertop I'd unknowingly paid for. My father came down at 7, poured himself coffee, asked if I'd slept well. I smiled, said I had, asked about his plans for the day. He mentioned maybe doing some yard work, maybe watching the game later. Did I want to order pizza for dinner? His treat. I said sure. Didn't mention that his treat would be paid for with money from a Social Security check, supplemented by the $3,600 I was still automatically sending him. Didn't mention that I knew. Didn't mention anything. Because this wasn't the moment. This was reconnaissance. This was information gathering. This was the careful, methodical preparation that came before every successful operation. Sienna emerged at 11:30, filmed her morning routine, talked to her phone about manifestation and gratitude and choosing abundance, posted it with hashtags about entrepreneur life and building your empire and rising and grinding. Then she asked if I could Venmo her $200 for a collaboration opportunity with a skincare brand. I sent it without hesitation, added a heart emoji, watched her face light up, watched her check her phone immediately to confirm the money had cleared, watched her smile at me, guileless and bright, like I was the best sister in the world. Like I was exactly the trained dog she'd described on that video. I smiled back, said of course anything to support her dreams. And I meant it, because I was about to support her dream of learning what consequences feel like. But first I needed to make some calls. First call, Grace Chen, retired Navy commander, my first commanding officer, the woman who taught me everything I knew about strategic thinking. We'd stayed in touch over the years, met for coffee whenever I was stateside, traded books and advice and stories about the absurdity of military bureaucracy. I asked if she had time to meet, told her I needed advice on a family matter. Legal advice, strategic advice. She heard something in my voice, told me to come over immediately. Second call, Sarah Mitchell, my best friend from high school, now a CPA with her own practice in downtown Boise. The person I'd trusted with my taxes every year, the one who'd helped me set up my investment accounts, who knew my financial situation better than anyone. Asked if she could review some documents. Personal matter, sensitive. Could she meet tomorrow? She said yes before I even finished asking. Third call, I didn't make. Not yet. But I researched attorneys who specialized in family law, property disputes, financial exploitation. Made a list of the top 5 in the Boise area. Read reviews, check their track records, prepared. Because that's what you do before a mission. You gather intelligence, you build your team, you prepare every contingency. You make sure that when you strike, it's fatal. I spent the rest of Saturday being the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. I fixed Sienna's car battery, took my father's truck to get the oil changed, went to the grocery store and bought $200 worth of food, top shelf everything, organic produce and grass-fed meat and artisanal bread. I smiled. I laughed. I played the role I'd been playing for 6 years, and I waited. Because they taught me patience too. Taught me that the best operations weren't the flashiest ones. The best operations were the ones that looked like nothing was happening until suddenly everything had already changed. That night, after they'd both gone to bed, I sat in my room and opened a new document. Started typing, not angry, not emotional, just factual, methodical. the kind of report I'd write about any intelligence target. Timeline of events, financial analysis, pattern of deception, evidence inventory, legal options, strategic recommendations. I wrote for 3 hours, 16 pages of single-spaced documentation. Every lie, every manipulation, every dollar they'd taken. Not because I needed it for myself. I'd remember every detail forever. But because I'd need it for attorneys, for courts, for the moment when this all became public, and they tried to spin it as me being unreasonable. At the end of the document, I added one more section. Personal impact analysis. The kind of thing we do in threat assessments, evaluating not just the financial damage, but the psychological, the operational, the long-term consequences. I'd miss promotions because I couldn't afford the extra training courses, couldn't take advantage of opportunities that required unpaid temporary duty, because I needed every paycheck to cover their lifestyle. I'd put off buying a car, buying a house, investing in my own future, because I'd believed I was investing in our collective future. I'd eaten meals from plastic pouches while they ate restaurant food every night, slept in a coffin-sized rack while they slept in king beds with expensive sheets, worn the same 4 sets of civilian clothes for 6 years, while Sienna bought $300 loungewear sets. I'd sacrificed, and they'd laughed about it. I saved the document, encrypted it, backed it up. Then I opened one more file, started a new spreadsheet. This one wasn't about the past. This one was about the future. About exactly how much I was going to take back. About exactly how I was going to do it. About the systematic, thorough, complete dismantling of everything they'd built on my money while thinking I'd never notice. Because here's what they didn't know. What they couldn't have known. Because I'd been careful, because I'd kept it separate. Because something in my gut had told me years ago to keep one part of my life completely private. They thought I needed them. Thought I needed that house, that mortgage payment, that family connection. They thought I was dependent on getting that money back. They were wrong. I had options they couldn't imagine, resources they didn't know existed, a whole life they'd never bothered to ask about because they were too busy spending the money I earned to wonder where else it might come from. And I was about to teach them a lesson about assumptions, about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, about what happens when you train someone for 11 years to analyze, strategize, and execute missions. Then make yourself the target. I closed my laptop. The clock read 2:17 in the morning. Sunday was about to begin. I had 48 hours before I had to report back to base for out-processing paperwork. 48 hours before I officially started my terminal leave, the final 60 days of my military career, before I'd separate with an honorable discharge and full benefits. 48 hours to set everything in motion. I lay down on the bed, stared at the string lights Sienna had hung without permission, listened to the house settle around me, this house my mother had bought, this house my father had promised to give me, this house they'd stolen piece by piece while I was protecting our country. And I smiled in the darkness, because they'd made one mistake, one critical, fatal mistake. They'd assumed I'd never fight back. Tomorrow they'd start learning how wrong they were. Tomorrow, the intelligence operation began. Grace Chen lived in a craftsman bungalow on the north side of Boise, 15 minutes from my father's house if you caught the lights right. I'd been there dozens of times over the years. Birthday dinners, promotion celebrations, that one Thanksgiving when I couldn't afford to fly home from Virginia, and she'd insisted I not spend it alone. Her front porch always had coffee ready before I knocked, like she had some sixth sense for when people needed her. This morning was no different. The door opened before my knuckles touched wood, and Grace stood there in running clothes, hair pulled back, holding 2 mugs of black coffee that could strip paint. "You look like someone died. Come in." I followed her to the kitchen table where she already had a legal pad, 3 pens in different colors, and her reading glasses. Grace Chen didn't do casual conversations about serious topics. She did tactical planning sessions with note-taking and action items. I pulled out my laptop, opened the folder labeled Operation Restoration, started explaining. She listened without interrupting for 23 minutes, took notes in her precise military handwriting, asked clarifying questions only when I referenced documents she couldn't see. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with an expression I'd seen her use on junior officers who'd made catastrophic errors in judgment. "Kate, this is financial exploitation, possibly fraud, definitely grounds for civil action. What do you want to do about it?" I want them to understand what they lost, not just money, me. She nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something she already suspected. You're not going to just demand the money back and walk away, are you? No. I'm going to make them realize they had someone in their family who was successful, generous, loyal, someone who would have helped them forever if they'd just been honest. And they destroyed that relationship for $50,000 they didn't even need. Grace smiled, the kind of smile that made junior officers nervous. That's more devastating than any lawsuit. But you'll need a team. She pulled out her phone, started texting while talking. I know 3 attorneys who specialize in this kind of thing. I know a forensic CPA who owes me a favor. And I know you well enough to know you've already documented everything 6 ways from Sunday. 7 ways. I backed up to 3 different cloud services. Of course you did. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Mitchell Davidson can see you this afternoon. 2 o'clock. He's the best estate and property attorney in Idaho. He's also mean as a snake when he needs to be. I need mean. I figured, what else? I took a breath. This was the part I hadn't told anyone. The part I'd kept separate from family, from most friends, from everyone except Grace and my business partner, because something in my gut had said to keep one piece of my life completely private. Grace, you remember that cybersecurity consulting work you encouraged me to start back in 2020? She nodded. You were always brilliant at that. How's it going? Better than I let anyone know. I didn't want family finding out because, well, now I know why that instinct was right. Grace, I've built it to $240,000 in annual revenue. After expenses and taxes, I've banked $180,000 over the last 4 years. Grace set down her coffee mug carefully, stared at me. Kate, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because something told me to keep it separate. Keep one thing they couldn't touch, couldn't ask for, couldn't turn into their next emergency fund. And thank God I did. Because now I have options. You don't need that money back to survive. No. But I'm going to get it back anyway. Because it's mine. Because they stole it. Because the principle matters more than the practical. Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your mother would be proud, not of the situation, but of you. Of how you're handling it. I felt something crack in my chest, swallowed it down. Mom left me a letter. Patricia Morgan has it. Mom knew. She knew Dad was weak, that Sienna would manipulate him, that I needed protection from my own family. She tried to give me that protection, and Dad, I couldn't finish. Grace didn't make me. We have 2 days before you report back to base. Let's make them count. The law offices of Mitchell and Davidson occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial windows. The kind of place that charged $400 an hour and earned every penny. Mitchell Davidson was 56, silver-haired, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen every variety of human ugliness and stopped being surprised. His partner, Rebecca Torres, was younger, sharper, with the energy of a litigator who genuinely enjoyed courtroom combat. I presented my case like a military briefing. Timeline of events, financial documentation, video evidence, property records, witness statements, 3-inch binder, tabbed and indexed, every document cross-referenced. Rebecca flipped through it with increasing amazement. Ms. Sullivan, I've been practicing law for 18 years. This is the most organized client file I've ever received. Are you sure you're not an attorney? Not an intelligence officer. Seemed applicable. Mitchell leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. You have multiple causes of action. Unjust enrichment for the $50,400 sent after the mortgage payoff. Fraudulent misrepresentation regarding the debt status. Quiet title action for the property ownership dispute. Conversion of funds for the fraudulent emergency requests. We could also pursue breach of fiduciary duty, constructive fraud, emotional distress. Rebecca added, we're looking at potential damages well into 6 figures if we go aggressive. But before we talk strategy, I need to understand your objective. What do you actually want? Maximum financial recovery? Public vindication, punishment, family reconciliation? I met their eyes. I want them to understand what they lost. See, they think I'm desperate, that I need that house, that I'm financially dependent on recovering this money. I'm not. I have savings from a business they don't know exists. What I want is for them to realize they had someone extraordinary in their family, someone who was successful and generous and completely loyal. And they destroyed that relationship for money they didn't need. I want them to watch me walk away and thrive while they lose everything they took for granted. Mitchell and Rebecca exchanged glances. Some wordless communication passed between them. Rebecca spoke first. That's actually more devastating than money, and legally cleaner. We're not pursuing this out of vengeance. We're pursuing it because you're entitled to restitution. So here's my strategy. We demand full repayment of the $50,400 sent after mortgage payoff, return of your mother's $43,000, plus property transfer per your mother's wishes, plus legal fees. Give them 60 days. When they can't pay, and they won't be able to, we offer a settlement. They sell the house, split proceeds according to proper ownership percentages. You walk away completely. They end up with less than if they'd been honest from the start. Mitchell nodded approvingly. Poetic justice delivered through legal channels. I like it. But Ms. Sullivan, I need to warn you, family litigation is brutal. They'll try to manipulate you, guilt you, paint you as heartless. Can you handle that? I've handled worse. I met with David Chung at 4:30. Grace had called ahead, explained the situation, sent him my financial documentation. He'd already started preliminary analysis by the time I arrived at his small office on Fairview Avenue. David was 42, second-generation Korean American, with the methodical precision of someone who found comfort in numbers. He had my bank statements spread across his desk, color-coded sticky notes marking specific transactions. Ms. Sullivan, sit. Let me show you what I found. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his monitor. I categorized your transfers into 3 buckets. Legitimate household expenses, mortgage until October 2023, property tax, basic utilities, reasonable food costs. That averages $3,900 per month until the mortgage payoff, then drops to $1,100 monthly after. You were sending $3,600 monthly throughout. Before October 23, you were covering 92% of household costs. After October 23, you were sending more than 3 times what was actually needed. He clicked to another sheet. Then we have the emergency transfers. 27 separate transactions totaling $36,000. I cross-referenced these against actual documented expenses. Car repairs. I found receipts for only $800, but you sent $4,200. Medical bills. Insurance covered most of it. Actual out-of-pocket was maybe $600. You sent $3,800. The IRS emergency. No record of any IRS contact or payment. That was just $5,000 they pocketed. Pattern is clear. Most of these emergencies were fabricated or grossly inflated. You were systematically defrauded across multiple years through fake crises. My professional opinion, this meets the threshold for financial exploitation in Idaho. If you wanted to pursue criminal charges, you'd have grounds. I don't want criminal charges. Civil restitution only. Smart. Cleaner. But you should know, this case is airtight. Any competent attorney would settle immediately rather than face trial. The video evidence alone is devastating, but combined with the documentary proof of the mortgage payoff concealment and the pattern of fabricated emergencies, you'll win. He printed out his full report, 42 pages of analysis, charts, comparisons, documentation. This will stand up in any court in America. You've been systematically defrauded for over a year, and I can prove it 6 ways from Sunday. I spent Monday building my witness list, made calls, explained situations, and asked for support. Patricia Morgan first, my mother's best friend, the CPA who'd done our family taxes for 20 years, who'd been there when Mom died, and watched my father make promises he never intended to keep. Her voice cracked when I explained everything. Kate, honey, I've been waiting for you to figure this out. I tried to tell you last year, tried to hint that something wasn't right, but you were deployed and I didn't want to dump this on you while you were overseas. You have documents about Mom's intentions? Everything. Your mother came to me 2 months before she died. She knew Thomas wasn't good with money, knew Sienna was manipulating him. She wanted to make sure you were protected. I have her letter, the deed transfer papers Thomas never signed, documentation of her original down payment. Kate, your mother bought that house entirely with her own money. Thomas contributed maybe $30,000 over the course of their marriage. That house was always meant to be yours. I'll need copies of everything. I already made them. I've been keeping them safe, waiting for the right moment. I think this is it. Aunt Linda next. My father's older sister, the one family member who'd never quite approved of how he handled things after Mom died. I'm not surprised, Kate. Not even a little bit. Your father, I love my brother, but he's weak. Always has been. And Sienna learned she could manipulate him when she was about 12 years old. That combination was always going to end badly. She paused. Your mother was the strong one, the one with integrity. Thomas relied on her for everything: moral compass, financial sense, basic adulting. When she died, he just collapsed inward, started letting Sienna make decisions, started taking the easy way out of every situation. I watched it happen and I couldn't stop it. I'll testify if you need me to. Your mother deserves better than this, and so do you. Sarah Mitchell met me at the same coffee shop where I'd sat with Grace. Reviewed my documentation with the clinical eye of someone who dealt with numbers for a living. Kate, this is financial abuse. It doesn't matter that you're not elderly or disabled. This is someone in a position of trust. Your father. Exploiting your resources for personal gain. The fact that Sienna is involved just makes it conspiracy. You could probably get treble damages if you pursued this aggressively. Maybe 200,000 total. I don't want treble damages. I want exactly what they took. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Sarah looked at me with something like admiration. That's actually scarier. You're not being greedy. You're being precise. That's the kind of response that makes people realize they fucked with the wrong person. By Monday evening, I had 4 solid witnesses. A forensic accounting report that would make prosecutors weep. Legal representation that specialized in exactly this kind of case, and a strategy that would leave my family with less than they'd have had if they'd just been honest. I spent Monday night finalizing documentation, creating exhibits, preparing the kind of comprehensive case file that left no room for argument, no space for excuse, no possibility of claiming misunderstanding. Then I did something I'd been putting off. I opened a new email, addressed it to my business partner, Marcus Webb, told him everything. Explained why I might be distracted for the next few weeks, why I might need him to handle more of the client management, why my personal life was about to explode in ways that might require professional boundaries. His response came back in 4 minutes. Kate, take whatever time you need. I've got the business covered, and for what it's worth, burn them down. You've earned the right. Tuesday morning, I found Sienna in the living room, setting up her ring light for what looked like a product review. Some kind of wellness supplement that promised to balance hormones and boost energy, and probably did nothing except empty wallets. Turn off the camera. She glanced at me, annoyed. I'm literally in the middle of filming. I walked over and unplugged the ring light. The room went dim except for natural light from the windows. What the fuck, Kate? You called me the dumb Navy sister. On camera. My camera. The one I installed and paid for. Her face went through 3 distinct expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, panic. I pulled out my phone, showed her the video, turned up the volume so she could hear her own voice, bright and cruel and careless, talking about me like I was livestock. She's trained like a dog. We say jump. She asks how much money you need. The color drained from her face. You're spying on us? No. I installed a security camera for safety 9 months ago. You chose to incriminate yourself in front of it. That's not spying. That's you being stupid. She stood up, defensive anger replacing panic. That was a private conversation. In a shared space. In a house I partially own. On a camera I own and installed. Nothing private about it, Sienna. Her hands clenched into fists. Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. You do think you're better than me. You always have. Perfect Kate. Military hero. Meanwhile, I'm here every single day taking care of Dad while you're off having adventures. You have no idea what it's like to be the one who stayed. I let her wind up, let her build momentum. Then I delivered the killing blow. You were here. Past tense. As of today, I'm forcing the sale of this house. I own 40%. You got your 30% through fraudulent transfer. The house goes on the market in 60 days. You need to find somewhere else to live. She actually laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You can't do that. This is my home. I can. I spoke with 3 attorneys yesterday. They all confirmed it. I can force partition and sale, and I will. The laughter died. Her face crumpled. Kate, please, don't do this. We can work something out. You had a year to work something out. You chose to take $50,000 instead. That was your choice. I walked past her, heading for my room. She called after me, voice breaking. What about us? What about being sisters? I stopped, turned back. You stopped being my sister the moment you started calling me a trained dog. My father cornered me that evening, knocked on my bedroom door with the tentative uncertainty of someone who knew they were walking into hostile territory, but hoped politeness might save them. Kate, can we talk, please? Like adults. Adults don't steal from their children, Dad. He flinched but didn't leave. I didn't steal. I used money for family purposes. Name one family purpose that cost $2,500 a month after the mortgage was paid off. Silence. He had nothing. We both knew it. Groceries, utilities, maintenance. Things add up. No, they don't. I had a forensic accountant review everything. Actual expenses after October 2023, $1,100 monthly. I was sending $3,600. The other $2,500 went to Sienna's lifestyle and your comfort. That's not family purposes, that's fraud. His face shifted. Tried different tactics. Landed on the one that had always worked before. Your mother wouldn't want this. She'd want us to stay together as a family. And that's when something in me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just clean and final, like a cable cut under tension. Don't you dare use Mom! Don't you dare! I pulled out my phone, showed him the email from Patricia. Subject line, documents from Margaret. Attached, scanned PDF of my mother's handwritten letter. Mom left me a letter. Patricia has it. Mom knew, Dad. She knew you were weak. She knew Sienna would manipulate you. She knew I needed protection from my own family, so she wrote out her wishes explicitly. The house should go to me. Just me. And she made you promise to sign the deed transfer. I watched his face as he read the preview of Mom's letter on my phone screen. Watched him realize I knew everything. You looked her in the eye while she was dying. You promised. Then you broke that promise, kept the house, gave 30% to Sienna, and milked me for $50,000. So no. Mom wouldn't want us to stay together. Mom wanted me protected from you. He stood there, mouth opening and closing, no words coming out. Finally managed. I couldn't let go of the house. It was all I had left of her. No, it was all you had. I had her lessons, her values, her strength, her actual love, not just her real estate. You just had property. I closed the door, locked it, heard him standing outside for 30 seconds before his footsteps retreated down the hall. Wednesday morning, I sent the email. 3 hours of drafting, revising, checking every word for legal exposure, making sure it was factual rather than emotional, devastating rather than inflammatory. Subject line, setting the record straight, family financial matter. 28 recipients. Every aunt, uncle, cousin, family friend who'd been part of my life growing up. People who'd watched me join the military, who'd sent care packages during deployments, who'd believed they knew what was happening in our family. I laid it out clearly. 6 years of transfers totaling $280,000. The mortgage paid off 14 months ago without notification. $50,400 sent unnecessarily. The video of Sienna discussing the arrangement. Property ownership transferred without my knowledge. Mom's letter explicitly stating her wishes. Attached every piece of evidence, bank statements, loan documents, property records, screenshots of the video, Mom's letter, Patricia's affidavit. Ended with, I'm not sending this for sympathy, I'm sending it for transparency. When they claim I'm tearing the family apart or being greedy, you'll know the truth. Then I hit send and watched my phone explode. First response came in 11 minutes. Aunt Linda. I'm furious. Coming over to talk to Thomas right now, this is unacceptable. Then Uncle Ray, Dad's brother who'd never quite liked him. Disgusting, you deserve better, I'll testify if needed. Cousin Michelle, who practiced family law in Oregon. Can't represent you because of conflict, but I know 5 attorneys who'd take this case pro bono just on principle. Call me. The supportive messages kept coming. 18 out of 28 recipients firmly on my side, outraged on my behalf, offering help and testimony and solidarity. But there were others. Aunt Marlene, this is inappropriate. Family matters should stay private. You're making everyone uncomfortable. Cousin Jessica, Sienna is doing her best. Influencing is real work. You're being harsh. Uncle David, your father made mistakes, but he's still your father. This feels vindictive. And then, 27 minutes after I sent the email, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Richard Walsh, attorney for Sienna and Thomas Sullivan. We need to discuss this situation before it escalates further. Please contact me immediately. They'd lawyered up. Good. Now they were taking me seriously. But before I could respond, my phone lit up with notifications from Instagram. Sienna had posted. The first image showed her crying, mascara running, face blotchy and raw. Caption, When family betrays you for money, the second was a long text post, screenshot and shared to her story. I've been supporting my aging father while my sister chose career over family. Now she's demanding money for being a good daughter, accusing me of fraud. Love doesn't come with receipts. But apparently for some people, family is just another transaction. The third post was a video. Sienna in her car, tears streaming, voice breaking. My sister just sent an email to our entire family accusing me and my dad of stealing from her. All because we used money she voluntarily gave to actually run our household. She's claiming we defrauded her. But the reality is she's trying to punish us for not living the life she thinks we should live. I'm trying to build something, a business, a brand, a future. And she's weaponizing her military salary to control us, to make us feel small. If you've ever felt unsupported by family, if you've ever been criticized for chasing your dreams, please send love. I need it right now. The comments flooded in. Her followers, young women who saw her filtered life and believed it, rushed to defend her. Stay strong, babe. Your sister sounds toxic. Family should support dreams, not tear them down. But then other voices started appearing. Voices that had done the math, that had looked at her previous posts, that remembered the luxury purchases and daily restaurant meals and vacation photos. Wait, you're calling her toxic when you literally called her a trained dog on video? She's asking for her own money back that you spent on your lifestyle. That's not weaponizing anything. Your business makes $400 a year, but you spend $3,000 a month? That's not entrepreneurship, that's being unemployed. And then someone, I never found out who, created a comparison post. Screenshots of Sienna's Instagram over the past year, designer bags, first-class flights, expensive restaurants, luxury skincare, new Apple products, high-end workout gear, all time-stamped, all tagged with price estimates. Total estimated spending, $47,000 plus. Caption: this is what struggling to build a business looks like when you're spending someone else's money. The post went viral in military family groups. Veterans' spouses sharing it with comments like, "This is why service members don't trust family with money." And imagine sacrificing for your country, while your sister lives this life with your salary. Sienna's comment section turned into a battlefield. Her carefully curated image of struggling entrepreneur cracked wide open, revealing the reality underneath. By Wednesday afternoon, she'd lost 2,000 followers and gained a reputation as exactly what she was, someone who'd built an Instagram aesthetic on stolen money. Her last post of the day was quieter. No makeup, no ring light, just her sitting on her bed, looking exhausted. I'm taking a break from social media. I need to reflect on some things. Thank you to everyone who showed support. And to those who called me out, you're not wrong. I have a lot to learn about accountability. Comments disabled. Thursday morning brought a different kind of reckoning. I met Patricia Morgan at her office downtown. She handed me a manila envelope, sealed and labeled with my mother's handwriting. Catherine Sullivan, to be opened after my death. Important. Inside was everything Patricia had promised. Mom's letter, 4 pages of handwritten instructions and love and worry. The unsigned deed transfer, prepared by an attorney, only lacking my father's signature to complete the transfer of full ownership to me. Documentation of Mom's original down payment, every canceled check, every receipt, proof that she'd put $65,000 down in 1998, not a penny of it from my father's accounts. Bank statements showing a separate account in Mom's name only. Opened in 2016. Steady deposits from her nursing salary. Balance as of her death, $41,312. Patricia handed me another document. This is the account information. Your mother designated me as executor with instructions to transfer everything to you when you returned from deployment. I couldn't do it while you were overseas. Legal complications with military addresses. But you're stateside now. The account is ready to transfer. With interest, it's currently at $43,200. My hands shook holding the papers. They sat on this money, knew about it, and never told me. Patricia's expression hardened. Worse, your father asked me about it 3 months after Margaret died. Wanted to know if he could access it as surviving spouse. I told him no. It was designated specifically for you. He tried to argue that surely Margaret would want him to use it for household expenses if needed. I reminded him that Margaret's instructions were crystal clear. He stopped asking. But he knew Kate. He knew you had money waiting, and he chose not to tell you while taking your monthly payments. That's when the full scope of the betrayal landed. Not just the stolen payments, not just the lies about the mortgage, but the active concealment of assets that were rightfully mine while they drained my accounts for their lifestyle. I felt something shift in my chest, something cold and final and absolute. They knew I had a safety net and they hid it from me so they could keep using me as theirs. Patricia nodded. I've been waiting 6 years to give you this information, waiting for you to come home, to be ready to handle it. I think you're ready now. I spent Thursday afternoon at a coffee shop, laptop open, reviewing everything one more time. The full scope of the operation laid out in spreadsheets and documents and evidence files. My phone buzzed. Text from Richard Walsh, their attorney. Ms. Sullivan, my clients are prepared to discuss a reasonable settlement. Can we meet tomorrow morning? 10 a.m. at my office? I forwarded it to Rebecca Torres. Her response came back immediately. Don't meet without me present. I'll be there. And Kate, they're scared. That's why they're moving fast. They know they're screwed. I replied to Walsh, fine, but my attorney will be present. His response, of course, see you tomorrow. That evening, I took a walk through the neighborhood I'd grown up in, past houses where kids I'd gone to elementary school with had lived, past the park where Sienna and I used to play before everything got complicated, before she became someone I didn't recognize, before family became a transaction instead of a relationship. I thought about Mom, about how she'd known this would happen, how she'd tried to protect me even from her deathbed, how she'd understood that love and manipulation could wear the same face if you weren't careful. She'd given me the tools to protect myself, the letter, the money, the documentation, everything I needed to stand up and say no more. I just wished she'd lived long enough to see me use them. My phone rang. Grace Chen, how are you holding up? I don't know, angry, sad, relieved, all of it at once. That's normal. You're grieving what you thought you had. That's harder than grieving what's actually gone. Did I do the right thing sending that email? Kate, you gave them transparency. They would have spun this as you being cruel and unreasonable. Now everyone knows the truth. That's not cruel. That's self-defense. She paused. Tomorrow's the big meeting. Are you ready? I've been ready for 6 years. I just didn't know it. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and temperatures in the low 40s. I dressed carefully. Professional, but not corporate. Jeans, blazer, the kind of outfit that said, I'm serious, but I'm not trying to prove anything because I don't need to. Rebecca met me in this parking lot of Walsh's building downtown. Remember, let me do most of the talking. Your job is to stay calm, stay quiet, and look completely unaffected by anything they say. Can you do that? I've sat through classified briefings where one wrong word could start wars. I can handle a family lawyer trying to guilt trip me. She grinned. God, I love military clients. Let's go make them sweat. Richard Walsh's office was generic lawyer chic. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, diplomas on the wall from a law school I'd never heard of. He was younger than I expected, maybe 32, with the eager nervousness of someone who'd taken on a case he was starting to realize he couldn't win. My father and Sienna sat on one side of the desk, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. Dad's face was gray, exhausted. Sienna's eyes were red-rimmed, no makeup, wearing regular clothes instead of her usual influencer costume. Walsh cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I think if we approach this with open minds and good faith, we can reach an agreement that works for everyone. Rebecca smiled pleasantly. Mr. Walsh, let's be clear about something from the start. My client has an airtight case for fraud, unjust enrichment, and property rights violations. She has video evidence, financial documentation, and witness testimony that would eviscerate your clients in court. We're here as a courtesy, not because we need to be. Walsh's face tightened. Ms. Torres, I think that's a bit... Rebecca held up a hand. I'm not finished. My client is willing to settle, but the terms are non-negotiable. Full repayment of $50,400 sent after the mortgage was paid off. $43,200 from her mother's account that was concealed. Transfer of property ownership per Margaret Sullivan's explicit wishes, and payment of all legal fees to date. Walsh glanced at my father and Sienna. My clients don't have $93,000 plus legal fees available in liquid assets. That's an unreasonable demand given their financial situation. Then they shouldn't have spent it. Well, Rebecca's voice was ice. Here's what's going to happen. Your clients have 75 days to come up with full restitution. They can liquidate assets, take loans, sell possessions. I don't care how, but that money will be repaid. Additionally, the house will be listed for sale immediately. Net proceeds will be split according to proper ownership percentages, 70% to my client per Margaret Sullivan's documented wishes, 30% to Mr. Sullivan. Ms. Sienna Sullivan receives 0, as her equity transfer was obtained through fraudulent means. If your clients refuse these terms, we file a civil suit Monday morning. And I promise you, the damages we'll pursue in court will make this settlement look generous. Walsh turned to my father. Thomas, Sienna, I need to be honest with you. This is the best deal you're going to get. The evidence against you is overwhelming. If this goes to trial, you'll lose, and you'll lose more than you would by accepting this offer. My father looked at me for the first time since I'd entered the room. Kate, please, we're family, can't we? I spoke for the first time. You became strangers the moment you decided my loyalty was something to exploit instead of cherish. Sign the settlement or go to court. Those are your options. Sienna spoke up, voice small and broken. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am. I was so caught up in pretending I was successful that I forgot to actually become successful. And I hurt you. I hurt you so badly, and I'm so sorry. I looked at her, saw something genuine in her face for the first time in years. Something that might have been real remorse instead of performance. But it didn't change anything. I'm glad you're sorry. I hope you learn from this. But my forgiveness isn't part of this negotiation. The only thing we're discussing here is money and property, nothing else. The room fell silent. Walsh pulled out documents. If you agree to these terms, we can have papers drawn up by Monday. Your attorney can review them before you sign. Rebecca nodded. We'll expect signed settlement agreement by Wednesday. First payment due within 30 days? My father signed without looking up. Sienna signed with shaking hands. I walked out of that office into bright December sunlight and felt nothing. Not triumph, not sadness, just the clean, clear sense of completion. Rebecca walked me to my car. You did good in there. Ice cold, perfect. I don't feel like I won. You didn't win. You recovered what was stolen and established consequences. That's different. Better. She handed me her card. The real work starts now, watching them follow through, making sure they actually pay. But Kate, the hard part's over. You stood up, you said no. Everything after this is just paperwork. I drove to Grace's house. She had wine waiting. We sat on her back patio, not talking, just existing in the space of someone who understood that sometimes the aftermath of battle is quieter than the battle itself. Finally, she spoke. What's next for you? After this is done? I'm leaving the Navy. Taking the discharge. I've got my business, I've got savings. I've got options that don't involve being connected to people who see me as a resource to mine. You're really walking away from all of it. Not walking away. Walking towards something better. There's a difference. My phone buzzed. Email from Marcus Webb, my business partner. Kate, just closed the DoD contract. $400,000 annually for 3 years. We need to hire. Congratulations, business partner. You're officially running a company that matters. I showed Grace the email. She raised her wine glass. To your mother, who gave you the strength to fight. And to you, who actually fought. We drank to that. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. Ms. Sullivan, this is Amber Rodriguez. I live 3 houses down from your dad's place. I heard what happened from my parents. I'm 19 and I want to join the Navy after high school. But my family is pressuring me to stay home and help with my younger siblings. They say wanting to leave is selfish. That family needs me. But I want more than this. Is that wrong? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, No, Amber, it's not wrong. Come to the coffee shop on Main Street tomorrow morning at 9. Let's talk. 'Cause here's what they didn't understand. What my father and Sienna would never understand. They thought breaking me would keep me tethered to them. Instead, it freed me to become who I was always meant to be. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who demanded respect. Someone who could teach the next generation that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just another word for being used. And I was done being used. The settlement papers arrived Wednesday. I read every word, signed on page 17, watched Rebecca file them with the court. 75 days until the first payment was due. 75 days until I could close this chapter completely. 75 days until I could prove that walking away from people who don't value you isn't loss. It's liberation. and I was about to show them exactly what liberation looked like. Amber Rodriguez sat across from me at the Main Street coffee shop with the posture of someone trying to take up less space than she deserved. 19 years old, dark eyes that held more intelligence than confidence, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched yet. My family says I'm being selfish, that I should stay and help with my brothers and sisters instead of joining the military. They say family comes first. I took a sip of my coffee, let the silence stretch. Tell me what you want, Amber, not what they want. What you want. She looked up, surprised by the directness. I want to serve. I want to learn things. Be somewhere that values what I contribute instead of just expecting it because I'm the oldest daughter. She stopped herself. Say it. I want to be more than what they've decided I should be. And they're making you feel guilty for that. She nodded, eyes filling. They keep saying how much they've done for me. How I owe them, how abandoning the family when they need me makes me ungrateful. And maybe they're right. Maybe I am selfish. Stop right there. My voice came out sharper than intended. She flinched. I just spent 6 years funding my family's entire lifestyle because they convinced me that's what good daughters do. You know what I got in return? Called a trained dog. Stolen from. Mocked. Because they confused my generosity with stupidity and my loyalty with weakness. I leaned forward. Here's what I learned, Amber. Helping family is beautiful. Being used by family is not. If you join the military, you'll have a career, education, skills, independence. And then you can help your family on your terms, with boundaries, in ways that don't destroy you. But if I leave, they'll struggle. They'll adapt. That's what people do when they can't rely on someone else to solve their problems. Your presence isn't helping them, it's enabling them. I pulled out my phone, showed her my banking app, the transfers I'd made for 6 years. $280,000. That's what helping without boundaries cost me. Don't let guilt turn you into an ATM with a heartbeat. She stared at the numbers. How did you finally stop? I got angry enough, to be honest. And then I got smart enough to be strategic. I handed her a business card, Grace Chen's contact information. This is my mentor. She's retired Navy, one of the best officers I ever served under. Call her. Tell her I sent you. She'll help you navigate the recruitment process, and she'll teach you how to set boundaries that protect you without making you cruel. Amber took the card with shaking hands. Why are you helping me? 'Cause nobody did this for me. And I want to be who I needed when I was your age. Over the next 75 days, Amber and I met 6 more times. I watched her go from uncertain to determined. Watched her take the ASVAB and score high enough for intelligence programs. Watched her tell her family she was enlisting whether they approved or not. Her mother cried. Her father said she was breaking his heart. Her siblings called her selfish. She enlisted anyway. I was at the recruitment office when she signed her contract. Watched her walk out with paperwork that would change her life, with shoulders straighter than when she'd walked in. Thank you for showing me it's possible. You did this yourself. I just held up a mirror so you could see what you were capable of. The first payment from my father arrived on day 28. Wire transfer for $10,000. No message, no explanation. Just money landing in my account like an apology he couldn't voice. I transferred it immediately to a new savings account I'd opened specifically for this purpose. Labeled it Recovery Fund. Watched the balance tick upward from 0 to 5 digits. Rebecca Torres called me that afternoon. They sold his truck and some collectibles. That's where the $10,000 came from. He's taking this seriously. Good. Kate, I need to prepare you. The next few payments might be harder for them. They've sold the easy assets. What comes next will hurt more. I don't care if it hurts. They had 75 days to figure it out. That's more generous than they deserve. The second payment came on day 42. $12,000. I learned later it came from selling my father's coin collection. Something he'd built over 30 years. Something that had actual sentimental value instead of just financial. I felt nothing when that money hit my account. Third payment, day 56. $15,000. Sienna had gotten a job. Target, overnight stock crew, $16 an hour. She'd worked every available shift for 6 weeks, and combined with my father's part-time wages from the hardware store, they'd scraped together this payment. That one made me pause, made me wonder if maybe she was actually learning something. But learning doesn't erase theft, and effort doesn't equal restitution. Fourth payment, day 68, $18,000. My father had borrowed from his brother. Uncle Ray, who'd sent that terse email supporting me, had apparently agreed to loan money on the condition that this debt be settled in full. The family was fracturing along fault lines I'd exposed, some siding with me, some siding with them, most just uncomfortable with having to acknowledge that perfect families were fiction and ours had always been broken. Fifth payment, day 75 exactly. $50,600. I stared at the amount. That was the final payment, bringing the total to $105,600, covering the $50,400 in post-mortgage payments, the $43,200 from Mom's account, and $12,000 in legal fees. My phone rang within minutes. Rebecca Torres. They liquidated Thomas's retirement account, took the early withdrawal penalty. That's where the bulk of this came from. He destroyed his retirement to pay me back. He destroyed your security first, for over a year. This is just evening the score. She paused. The house listing goes live tomorrow. They have 90 days to vacate once it sells. How do you feel? Like I won something I never wanted to fight for in the first place. That's grief, Kate. Let yourself feel it. I didn't know how to feel grief that tasted like victory. The house sold in 43 days, $334,000. After fees and commissions, net proceeds were $317,000. 70% to me, $221,900. 30% to my father, $95,100. Sienna got nothing. The closing was handled by attorneys. I didn't attend. Didn't need to watch my father sign away the house my mother had built. The house he'd promised her would be mine. The house he'd stolen from me piece by piece until I took it back all at once. Rebecca sent me the wire confirmation. $221,900 deposited into my account. Combined with the $93,600 in direct repayments, I'd recovered $315,500 total, more than the $280,800 I'd sent over 6 years. The difference came from the house value appreciation and Mom's account interest. I'd gotten back everything they took, plus proof that standing up for yourself wasn't selfish. It was survival. I opened my laptop, looked at the full picture of my financial situation. Recovery funds, $315,500. Business savings, $180,000. Current checking, $12,000. Total net worth, $507,500. At 34 years old, I had $500,000 and no family. The math said I'd won. My chest said I'd lost something that couldn't be quantified in spreadsheets. Grace found me at my apartment 3 days after the house closed. She had Thai food and wine and the good sense not to ask how I was doing. We ate in silence for 20 minutes. Then she spoke. Amber ships out to boot camp next week. She wanted me to tell you. She's scared but excited. Says she couldn't have done it without you. I pushed noodles around my plate. I just told her what I wish someone had told me. You gave her permission to choose herself. That's not nothing, Kate. That's everything. I looked up. Did I do the right thing with my family, with all of this? You did the only thing. You protected yourself from people who were hurting you. That's not right or wrong. That's survival. It feels like I burned everything down for money I don't even need. You didn't burn anything down. You turned on the lights. They burned themselves by running from the truth. Grace refilled my wine glass. Here's what I know about you. You're 34. You have financial security most people don't achieve until they're 60. You have a successful business you built from nothing. You have skills and education and opportunities. You have people who respect you, who genuinely care about you, who don't see you as a resource to mine. You lost a father and sister who never valued you correctly. That's painful. But Kate, you didn't lose anything real. You lost the fantasy of what you wanted them to be. The fantasy had been expensive. $280,000 expensive. 6 years expensive. Countless sacrifices and missed opportunities expensive. But it was still just a fantasy. The real people, my real father, my real sister, those people had never existed. I'd been sending money to ghosts. I met Marcus Webb in person for the first time in 8 months. My business partner, the person who'd kept our cybersecurity consulting firm running while my personal life exploded, flew into Boise to discuss expansion plans. We met at a brewery downtown. He was 42, former Air Force, with the calm competence of someone who'd seen enough chaos to stop being surprised by it. So, you're not dead! Barely. He grinned. Your family situation settled? Settled and buried, and I'm never speaking of it again unless legally required. Good. Because we need to talk about scaling up. That DoD contract is just the beginning. I've got 3 more potential contracts in the pipeline. If we land even 2 of them, we're looking at $700,000 in annual revenue. But we can't service that with just the 2 of us. We need to hire analysts, project managers, maybe a business development person. I pulled out my laptop. I've got capital now. Significant capital. We can hire, expand office space, invest in better infrastructure. Build this into something real instead of a side hustle we run between deployments. Marcus leaned back. You're serious about this, about going all in. I just spent 75 days watching my family liquidate their lives to pay back money they stole from me. I'm not wasting that money on anything half-hearted. Let's build something that matters. We spent 4 hours mapping out growth strategy. By the time we left that brewery, we had a hiring plan, a budget, and a timeline that would triple our capacity within 6 months. I'd started the consulting business 4 years ago as insurance, as a safety net my family couldn't touch, as proof that I was more than just a military paycheck. Now it was becoming my actual life, my purpose, the thing I'd build instead of rebuilding broken family bonds. 2 weeks after the house closed, I got an email. Sienna's name in the sender field. Subject line, no response needed. I almost deleted it without reading. Almost. But something made me open it. Kate, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know this email isn't welcome. But my therapist says I should write it anyway, even if you never respond. Because taking accountability isn't about getting forgiveness. It's about being honest. I was wrong about everything. About you, about what I was building, about what family means. I called you a trained dog, and I treated you like an ATM. And I justified it by telling myself I deserved your support because I was trying to build something. But I wasn't building anything. I was performing success while you funded the performance. And when you pulled back the curtain, I couldn't handle seeing what I actually was. A 28-year-old woman with no real skills, no real income, and no real understanding of how work actually works. I've been at Target for 3 months now. Overnight stock crew. It's hard and boring, and my body hurts, and I make in a week what I used to spend on a purse. And it's the most honest work I've ever done. I'm taking community college classes during the day. Business management, for real this time. Not because I think it'll make me an influencer again, but because I need to actually learn how businesses function if I ever want to run one. Dad's living in a 1-bedroom apartment on the south side. I see him once a week. He's different, quieter. I think losing the house broke something in him that needed to break. He's working part-time at the hardware store and going to therapy, and trying to figure out who he is when he's not the guy with the big house his dead wife bought. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to respond. I'm not even asking you to believe that I've changed, because talk is cheap and I've done nothing but talk for years. I'm just telling you that you were right about all of it. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it. I hope you're building something beautiful with your freedom. You deserve that. Sienna. I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden asks, for the subtle guilt trips that had defined every conversation with her for years. Found nothing but words that sounded like someone who'd actually broken and started putting themselves back together with honesty instead of filters. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Saved it in a folder labeled Maybe Later, right next to the folder with my mother's letter and all the evidence I'd collected. Right next to the documents that proved what they'd done and what I'd survived. Maybe later I'd be ready to acknowledge growth. Maybe later I'd be ready to risk believing she'd actually learned something. But not today. Today, I was still protecting the space I'd fought so hard to create. 3 months after the settlement closed, I established the Margaret Sullivan Memorial Scholarship. $50,000 from my recovery money, invested in an endowment that would generate annual scholarships for young women pursuing military service. Criteria: women aged 18 to 25 from low-income families who faced family pressure not to enlist. Preference given to those showing leadership potential and financial need. First-year funding, 5 scholarships at $5,000 each. Amber Rodriguez was recipient number 1. The ceremony was small. Grace Chen's backyard, 8 people total. Amber's parents came, still uncomfortable with her decision but present. They'd started coming around once they realized she was actually leaving, whether they supported her or not. Amber stood in front of everyone, holding the scholarship certificate, and choked up trying to thank me. Ms. Sullivan gave me permission to choose myself, when everyone else wanted me to choose them. She showed me that loving your family doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. And Her voice broke. She made me believe I deserved to take up space in the world. The other 4 recipients were there too. Young women who'd been told that wanting more was selfish, who'd been guilted into staying small, who needed someone to say you're allowed to leave. I looked at them and saw myself at 19, saw the choice I'd made to join the Navy against my father's protests, saw the years of sending money home to prove I hadn't abandoned them, saw the moment I'd finally realized you can't abandon people who only valued you as a resource. This is what my mother wanted, for me to be strong enough to help others without destroying myself in the process. These scholarships, they're my boundaries made tangible, my love made sustainable, my help made healthy. Because the difference between supporting someone and being used by someone is consent and reciprocity. And I'd finally learned to tell the difference. 6 months after everything ended, I stood in the office space Marcus and I had leased downtown. 1,200 square feet of exposed brick and tall windows and room for the team we'd built. 3 analysts, 1 project manager, 1 business development lead, plus Marcus and me. 7 people building something real. Revenue projections for year 1, $850,000. My salary, $120,000. More than I'd made in the military. More than I'd ever made in my life. Money I'd earned without sacrificing my dignity or funding someone else's delusion. The team was in a meeting. Through the glass wall, I watched them collaborate on a proposal for a financial services client. Watched them do work that mattered, solve problems that needed solving, build something legitimate instead of performing success on Instagram. This was what entrepreneurship actually looked like. Not acai bowls and ring lights, but budgets and client meetings and payroll and health insurance, and doing the hard, boring work that made businesses function. Sienna had wanted to be an entrepreneur, but she'd wanted the aesthetic without the substance, the title without the responsibility. I'd become an entrepreneur without meaning to, built a business because I was good at something people needed, grew it because I understood that real value came from actual expertise, not curated content. And I'd done it while keeping it separate from family, while protecting it from people who would have seen it as their emergency fund instead of my life's work. That instinct to keep secrets, that had been self-preservation wearing the mask of privacy. Grace came by at 5 with coffee and pastries for the team. Look at you, CEO of an actual company. Your mother would lose her mind with pride. I think she knew. Somehow. That's why she left me that letter. She knew I'd need permission to be strong instead of accommodating, to choose myself when everyone else wanted me to choose them. Grace handed me coffee. Speaking of choosing yourself, when's the last time you went on a date? I stared at her. I just dismantled my entire family structure and built a company from scratch in 6 months. Romance hasn't exactly been a priority. Make it one. You're 35. You have money and time and freedom. Use them for something other than work and righteous anger. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent 6 months in survival mode, building, recovering, protecting, proving. Maybe it was time to actually live. 8 months after the settlement, I got a letter. Actual paper, actual envelope, my father's handwriting on the front, forwarded from the old house address to Rebecca's office to me, like it had traveled through legal channels to reach me safely. Inside was 2 pages, handwritten, my father's careful block letters covering both sides of lined paper. Kate, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm writing because I need to take responsibility without conditions, without hoping for reconciliation, just because it's what I should have done a year ago. I failed you. I failed your mother. I failed at being a man worth respecting. Margaret made me promise I'd sign over the house to you. I looked her in the eye as she was dying, and I promised. Then I broke that promise because I was scared. Scared of being alone in a smaller place. Scared of admitting I couldn't afford the life she'd built. Scared of being the failure I'd been avoiding seeing in the mirror. I let Sienna manipulate me because it was easier than setting boundaries. I took your money because it was easier than adjusting my lifestyle. I lied to you because it was easier than being honest. Everything I did was the easier choice, and it cost me my daughter. I'm 63 years old, Kate. I have a 1-bedroom apartment, a part-time job, and a retirement account I destroyed because of my own weakness. I have a brother who barely speaks to me, a daughter who doesn't speak to me at all, a family that fractured because I couldn't handle the truth about my own inadequacy. I deserve all of it, but you didn't deserve any of what I did to you. You deserved a father who celebrated your success instead of exploiting it, who supported your service instead of treating it as an income stream, who honored his wife's final wishes instead of prioritizing his own comfort. I am sorry. Not because I want forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but because you deserve to hear it. You deserved better. Your mother knew that. She tried to protect you from me, and I proved her right. I hope you're building something beautiful with your life. I hope you've surrounded yourself with people who value you correctly. I hope you never send another dollar to anyone who can't prove they deserve your generosity. And I hope someday, maybe years from now, you can remember that I did love you. I just loved myself more. And I'm sorry for that most of all. Dad, I read the letter once, then put it in the folder with Sienna's email, the folder labeled Maybe Later. Apologies were nice, accountability was necessary. But neither changed the past. Neither erased the theft or the lies or the year I'd spent funding their lifestyle while they mocked me. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday I'd be ready to acknowledge their growth or accept their regret or allow the possibility of limited contact on my terms. But that day wasn't today. Today I was still building the life they'd tried to steal from me. 1 year after I'd watched that security camera footage, I stood in my condo, bought with cash, $180,000, my name on the deed, nobody else's, and took inventory. Net worth, $575,000. Business revenue, on track for $900,000 this year. Employees, 7 people who depended on me to run things ethically. Scholarship recipients, 5 young women who'd chosen themselves because I'd shown them it was possible. Family relationships, 0. Dating life, emerging, tentative, finally making space for connection that wasn't transactional. Therapy sessions, weekly, learning to grieve the family I'd wanted while accepting the family I'd actually had. Sleep quality, better than it had been in years. The math said I'd won, but winning looked different than I'd expected. Quieter, lonelier, more solid. I'd lost people who shared my blood, but I'd gained people who shared my values. I'd lost the fantasy of unconditional family love, but I'd gained the reality of conditional respect from people who'd earned the right to be in my life. I'd lost $280,000 over 6 years, but I'd recovered it and learned what it actually bought. Freedom from people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. Grace came over for dinner that night. We cooked together in my kitchen, my groceries, my life, and talked about everything and nothing. Halfway through the meal, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you regret it, any of it? I thought about it honestly. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they put me in a position where the only healthy choice was to burn it all down. I regret that my mother died believing her husband would honor her wishes, and I had to prove him wrong legally. But do I regret standing up, demanding repayment, walking away from people who hurt me? No, not for a second. Grace raised her wine glass. To your mother, who gave you the tools, and to you, who actually used them. We drank to that. Later, alone, I pulled out my mother's letter one more time. Read the words I'd memorized by now. My dearest Kate, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger for you. I need you to know, this house is yours. I bought it with my money, my work. When I married your father, I kept it in my name specifically because I knew he wasn't good with money. I'm scared of what will happen after I'm gone. Your father loves you girls, but he's weak. He'll let Sienna manipulate him. She's always been able to twist him. I'm leaving instructions with Patricia. The house should be transferred to you alone when I die, but I know your father will fight it. He'll make you feel guilty. He'll say I wanted family to have it. Don't believe him. This house is your security, your future. Don't let anyone take that from you. I love you more than words. I'm sorry I won't see the woman you'll become, but I know you'll be strong enough. Mom, I'd been strong enough. Barely. With help. With legal representation and forensic accounting and witnesses willing to testify to the truth. But I'd done it. I'd protected myself from my own family. Taken back what was mine. Walked away from people who loved me conditionally while I'd loved them completely. And I'd survived. More than survived. I'd built something better from the ashes of what they'd burned. 2 years after everything ended, Amber Rodriguez came home from her first deployment. I picked her up from the airport, watched her walk out in her Navy working uniform with the confidence of someone who'd chosen correctly. We went to the same coffee shop where this had started. How was it? Was it deployment? Hard, exhausting, the best thing I've ever done. She smiled. My family sent care packages, my mom wrote letters, my dad started telling people his daughter's in the Navy with pride instead of shame. It took them a while, but they came around once they realized I was serious. I'm glad that you got a different ending than me. She reached across the table. Ms. Sullivan, I got this ending because you showed me it was possible. Because you proved that loving your family doesn't mean setting yourself on fire for them. 3 more girls from my neighborhood enlisted after you started the scholarship. 2 of them are in boot camp right now. You didn't just save me. You gave all of us permission to save ourselves. That night, I updated my mother's scholarship fund, added another $25,000, enough to fund 5 more recipients per year for the foreseeable future. I thought about my mother, about how she tried to protect me with letters and documents and explicit instructions, about how she'd known her husband was weak and her youngest daughter was manipulative, and her oldest daughter would need armor. She'd given me everything she could. The rest I'd had to build myself. But I'd built it, and now I was passing it on. Not to my sister, not to my father. They'd had their chance to be part of something good. They'd chosen differently. But to young women who needed someone to say you deserve to choose yourself. You deserve to build your own life. You deserve to take up space without apologizing for it. To women who needed permission to be strong instead of accommodating. To the next generation of daughters who wouldn't make my mistakes. That was legacy. Not blood, not property, but values passed forward to people who'd actually honor them. 3 years after that night in my childhood bedroom when I'd watched a 47-second video that changed everything, I sat in my office and looked at the business Marcus and I had built. 15 employees, 1.2 million in annual revenue, contracts with 3 government agencies and 7 private sector clients. Office space that actually looked professional instead of scrappy. My salary, $160,000 per year. My net worth, $750,000. My family relationships, still 0. My chosen family, Grace Chen, Marcus Webb, Sarah Mitchell, Amber Rodriguez, Patricia Morgan. People who'd proven themselves through actions instead of asking me to prove myself through transactions. I'd spent 28 years believing family was the people you were born to. Then 6 years proving that belief would cost me everything. Then 3 more years learning that family was actually the people who showed up honestly, who respected boundaries, who valued you correctly without needing to be taught how. Blood didn't make you family. Respect did. Reciprocity did. Showing up when it wasn't convenient and staying honest when it wasn't easy and loving someone without treating them like an ATM, that made you family. My father and sister might learn that eventually, might grow into people capable of that kind of relationship. But I wasn't waiting around to find out. I'd built a life that didn't include them. A good life. A full life. A life where my worth wasn't measured by what I gave, but by who I was. And I'd done it without their permission. That was the real victory. Not the money recovered or the house sold or the settlement signed, but the understanding that I didn't need their approval to live well. I didn't need their recognition to be successful. I didn't need their love to know I was valuable. I'd always been valuable. They'd just been too busy exploiting me to notice. Their loss became my liberation, and I was never going back. The email arrived 3 years to the day after I'd sent that first message to extended family. Subject line, 3 years later. From Sienna Sullivan. Kate, I know you never responded to my last email. I understand why. I'm not expecting anything different this time. But I wanted you to know, I graduated. Associate's degree in business management. Took me 3 years of night classes while working full-time, but I did it. Real degree, real effort, real education instead of fake expertise. I'm assistant manager at Target now. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I earned it. No one bought it for me. No one funded it with stolen money. I deleted my Instagram 3 years ago. Just deleted it. Couldn't stand seeing the person I'd been, the life I'd faked, the money I'd wasted that wasn't even mine. Started over completely. Dad's doing okay. He's still in that 1-bedroom apartment, still working at the hardware store. But he's different, more honest. He talks about Mom sometimes without trying to use her memory as a weapon. He takes responsibility for his choices instead of blaming circumstances. We're not trying to get you back. I want you to know that. We're not scheming to manipulate you into reconciliation. You made your boundaries clear, and we're respecting them, because that's what adults do, and we're finally learning to be adults. I just wanted to update you. to show you that what you did, forcing us to face consequences, to actually fix ourselves instead of just performing redemption, it worked. We're better humans because you refuse to enable us anymore. You were right about everything. And I hope you're living a life so good that we're not even a footnote in it anymore. Sienna. I read it once, then archived it. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday 3 years would become 5, would become 10, and I'd be secure enough in my boundaries to risk limited contact. But that day was distant, hypothetical, contingent on me wanting it, not them needing it. For now, I had a business to run, employees to pay, scholarship recipients to mentor, a life to build that had nothing to do with the family I'd left behind. I opened my laptop, pulled up the strategic plan Marcus and I had drafted, 5-year projections showing continued growth, plans to open a second office, ideas for expanding our service offerings. This was my life now, built on my terms, funded by my work, surrounded by people who'd earned their place instead of demanding it through accident of birth. I'd started with nothing but a laptop and some cybersecurity skills and a gut instinct to keep one part of my life separate from people who saw me as a resource. That instinct had saved me. Now I was building an empire on the foundation of that separation. An empire that was mine, that nobody could take, that nobody had funded except me. My phone buzzed. Grace Chen. Dinner tonight? I'm making that Thai curry you like. On my way. I closed my laptop, locked my office, walked out into late afternoon Boise sunshine. 3 years ago, I discovered that the people I loved most had been stealing from me, that they saw me as trained animal instead of autonomous human, that my devotion was a weakness they'd exploit until I stopped them. I'd stop them. And in the space where they'd been, I'd built something better. Not a replacement family, you can't replace what was never real. But a chosen family. People who'd proven themselves, who showed up honestly, who loved me without needing to own me. That was worth more than $280,000. Worth more than a house or a settlement or even the satisfaction of winning. Because the real win wasn't getting my money back. It was getting myself back. The version of me who knew her worth, who set boundaries without apologizing, who walked away from people who hurt her instead of funding their ability to keep hurting her. The version of me my mother had hoped I'd become, strong enough to be generous without being used, brave enough to be vulnerable without being exploited, wise enough to know the difference between love and manipulation. I'd become her, finally, and I was never going back to being anyone else.